Intro to Azure Data Factory data flows. And it looks like all of you are in the right place, since a very small number have actually had any experience with these. So there we go. So a little bit about me before we get started. My name is Andy Letourneau, and I'm a Senior BI Consultant with PragmaticWorks. You can contact me through my PragmaticWorks email or on Twitter at Lady Runa. A quick summary about myself. I have a bachelor's in mathematics and physics. I have well over 20 years of experience with SQL, both as a DBA and a developer, and sewing is my superpower. Today, I introduce you to two types of data flows in the Azure Data Factory, and I will help you choose between which one of those you use, or perhaps choose not to use them at all. I don't know why that slide does that. Okay, so our agenda for the day, first of all, we're going to talk about in Azure Data Factory, what is the difference between the data flows and pipelines? What's the relationship between them? Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about what are wrangling data flows, and then what are mapping data flows, so that you know what they are. Then we'll go into a little demo where I will show you, here's how to create them, so you'll get to see them in action, and then we'll discuss which one should we use. All right. So first of all, what's the difference between a data flow and a pipeline? Essentially, the pipeline is going to be the container for the data flow. So you can see here, I have a pipeline that I had created. And then within there, under the move and transform, I can go drag and drop the data flow as a component, just like I would if I was going to use a pipeline for copying data or for any of the other functions that are available for pipelines. Creating a data flow, there's a couple ways you can do it. You could add it just like we saw in the earlier spot there where you put a block on, or you can just hit the plus to add the data flow. So data flow activity, or hitting a plus to add the data flow. And what that will do is it will pop up this dialog that gives you the choice between a mapping data flow and a wrangling data flow. One thing to note about the wrangling data flows, which is why so few of you have actually used them, they're still in preview. I believe that they first appeared like November or December 2019, and they've been in preview. First they were in private preview, and then they became public preview. I don't remember the dates. So because it's in preview, there's still some features of the wrangling data flow that hopefully will become available over time. So we'll learn more about those shortly. All right. So in here, first of all, this is Azure Data Factory. I popped open my Data Factory. Usually, this is the first screen you'll see. Anybody who hasn't used Azure Data Factory, there is a very large selection of videos that you can go and watch, and these two guys will tell you a lot about how to use Azure Data Factory. There's also a bunch of tutorials available. So in there, if we hit the pencil over here on the right that says authoring, and wait for a while, come on you, there it goes. So here it is. Now the pipelines, within the pipeline, I can create a new pipeline under move and transform. Now you can see that the data flow is part of the pipeline. A lot of people might be familiar with, if you have used Azure Data Factory, you've used the copy data to copy data from, say, blob storage into Azure SQL, or from a data lake, or from SAP into some other system. So that's that one. So let me just delete that. The data flow, pretty much the same thing. You drop it in. This particular data factory doesn't have any existing data flows, but here it is. That's exactly what I just showed you. To go create them, you just select the type, and then you'll carry on with that. So the data flows are parts of the pipeline. You can, in debug/testing mode, run the data flow without the pipeline, but if you want to publish it and then have it run automatically, say on a schedule, just like you do with regular pipelines, then you would have to have it inside of a pipeline. All right, so let's go back to our presentation. There he is. Okay, and let's find out what a mapping data flow is, first of all. This is an example of a mapping data flow. Usually you will use the mapping data flow to visually transform data without having to write any code. This way you can focus on the transformation In this, you can do transformations, those branches, joins, and sinks, schema modifications, row modifiers, and you can have multiple inputs and outputs for them. I gave here a list of the sources and sinks that are available for the mapping data flow. Now, if perchance you say, oh, well, my source is not listed on here, let's say it's SAP. What you'll do is you will start off your pipeline with a copy data. You will copy from SAP to Azure Blob Storage. Now that it's in Azure Blob Storage, you can then use a mapping data flow to do whatever processing that you need to do. So there are solutions. Any of the sources that aren't listed, we can always do a copy from that source into one of these listed sources. And then once we're finished, this is also the list of sinks that are available. So if I finish and I leave it in Azure SQL database, but I need to have it moved up to some CRM system, you can then have a copy data that can then move it elsewhere or change it into the different format that you need to have. So generally speaking, it'll feel like SSIS. This here is a picture of the taxi demo data flow in action, or actually more or less finished. And what would happen is as you're running it, each of these would turn green as the data has been processed. You'll see the time ticking off. And then when it's all green, you know that it's done. So again, very much feels like SSIS. The main difference is we have a limited number of transformations. This here is more or less the complete list. Once in a blue moon, they do go and add some new things. So I haven't double checked recently whether they've added anything beyond this, but at the time I made the slide several months ago, this was everything. And we'll see it in there and we'll see whether or not they've added more, but I don't think that they have added many. So these are the things that you can do with the mapping data flow. And I think it's nice that they give you a good, you see the good full list in there. This is everything you can do. Now, on the other hand, what's a wrangling data flow? Okay, if you're looking at this screenshot, look at it closely. What does it remind you of? If you've ever used Power BI, you know exactly what a wrangling data flow is. That's right. The wrangling data flow is based off of Power Query. You can use the wrangling data flows for visually exploring and preparing data sets while focused on modeling and data logic. Again, you're leveraging the Power Query data preparation, the same as your Power Query and Power BI, Excel, the other Power platforms if you've used any of those. So with this, you can design, build, manage data flows that execute at scale with the performance that you need to prepare your data for downstream analytics. The wrangling functions that you have are things like column management, row filters, merging and joining tables, group by, sorting, reducing rows, and many others. In fact, they are adding in more functionality as the preview goes on and as they're approaching the time when it ceases to be part of preview. Wrangling data flows are especially useful for data engineers or people who are called citizen data integrators. In other words, you might not be a regular IT person that always would be using Azure Data Factory, just like the IT people do it for the real moving, but you have the opportunity to use the Wrangling data flow to take advantage of the power of Spark in the back end to do your data analysis outside of Power BI so that you can quickly reformat your data and get it massaged into the format that you need to have it. So it's more of a visual way of wrangling it. It's good for less formal analytics scenarios, and the prepared data sets can be used for doing transformations and machine learning operations downstream. So if there's somebody who is into machine learning, this might be an easy way to take a large set of files, combine them, bring them into a table, and you don't really know the schema ahead of time, but now you can go in and actually see the data and visually manipulate it to some degree. All right, and I popped this up. This is the advanced editor. Again, this is just to emphasize it is based off of Power Query. If you've seen this, this is the M query that we all know and love. So if you're a master at M query, you could just go into the advanced editor mode and type things in there in M rather than using the UI. You do have to be careful because not all of the standard Power Query functions are available in this as compared to some of the other Power Query systems. I have here, this was actually from the help desk, but I found it very handy because it has a lot of good labels. So this might be something I would actually keep a copy of this just as a reminder. You can see here in the left-hand side, our number 1, the Azure Data Factory source data sets are going to be loaded under an ADF resource folder. Now, these data sets are not editable. Technically, you can edit them, but once you've edited them and you close out and you go back to it, it's not saved. So all your changes evaporate. Therefore, and I've seen this happen because I've done it a few times. That's how I learned it doesn't save it, because I did it and then got frustrated that it didn't save it. So you do not edit these. You edit the user query. That is the output of this particular data flow. So when you use that, you edit the user query and you see what the output is. Now, if you're in this one, you will find that there are a lot of functions that are listed in the menu up above here. In those areas, the functions are listed, but they are not available. And you'll find that out because you'll get an error message when you attempt to use them. But as time goes on, they will be adding more of them. I think they just have to figure out how do they take the M query and translate it into Spark automatically in the back end. That is actually what they're doing, is translating all of this. And sometimes it takes a bit of coding and a bit of effort for them to figure out, well, how do I translate, say, the pivot, which I know is one of the functions that is not available. How do I translate the pivot into Spark? Right now, they don't have an efficient way of doing that, so that is not available. There are a few other things that aren't available. They have a list in the help function. I'll show you that later of what is and is not available. You can publish them so that they'll be in the main one. You could say, you save a copy and then you publish to the main branch so that it'll be used everywhere. They do have a settings, and then you'll see along on the right-hand side, just like in all the Power Query, you will see the list of steps that have been applied already. So right now, this one here is just showing the source because the data was just pulled in. But if we had done some transformations here, there would be a whole list of applied steps. And same thing you can do in Power Query. You can change the order of the steps and all that. Now here's the list of Wrangling data flow sources and sinks. One thing I think you'll notice, if you recall,
Hey, Andy, if you're talking, we can't hear you. I just want to make sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
established. Okay. All right. I saw a message saying that my network connection was lost. I think you guys can see me now.
I think they were trying to see if they can see your slides. The slide that we see, I see a couple of questions saying that the slides haven't changed. So the one that we see is Wrangling data flow sources and sinks. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was seeing a message and it sounded like it said your network connection had been disconnected. And I was like, oh crumbs, nobody can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you now. We can hear you now.
Okay, good. Yeah, sorry about that. I live out in the boonies and sometimes the network connections flake out on me. All
Yeah, no
right,
problem.
so you guys have seen that. Come on. There we go. Okay, so here's the data flow restrictions. The availability is limited to data factories in 14 regions. Yes, the helps file does list what they are. Surprisingly enough, they haven't updated that since December. And I just discovered this morning, I had tested this last week and it didn't work. And then this week it does. So Central US apparently has just recently been added to the list of regions for the data flows. So the easiest way to find out whether or not it's available in your region, well, if you check the list and it's on there, you're in. If it's not on the list, give it a try and it will tell you pretty much right away as soon as you start attempting to make a Wrangling data flow. If it's not available, it will tell you after you select the sources and sinks and you go in there and you get ready to start editing, it will say Wrangling data flows are not available in this region. But it will take a while before it gives you the message. But if you're successfully able to work with it, then you know that they've added that region, but they haven't updated the document. Again, I wanted to make sure I emphasize, please perform all transformations on the user query because it will not save if you perform it on the other ones. So the source data sets are considered data set queries. They're in that ADF resource folder. And by default, the user query will point to the first data set query that you specify. So if you specify multiples, you would then have to do some sort of merge join or something like that within Power Query to link together any of the other queries you have. So change, again, reminder, changes to the dataset queries are not supported and they are not persisted. You can, as I said, you'll find that you can change them, and I've accidentally done that, but the data will not be saved. So once you save and close that Wrangling data flow, when you reopen it, all your changes to the dataset queries will disappear. You cannot rename, add, or delete queries after you've put them in. So just keep that in mind. Also, the Wrangling data flow currently supports writing to only one sink. Now, the other data flows and your Azure Data Factory pipelines, those can all write to multiple if you need to. But currently, the Wrangling data flow will only output one, essentially one table, which could be either a file if it's going into your blob storage or the SQL table or Cosmos DB table. And most mQuery functions are supported, and if a function isn't supported, an error message will be returned letting you know that it is not supported. At least it's pretty quick. In fact, there's those are the error messages that I got when I attempted to do a pivot and unpivot. So you definitely will see those errors every time you try to use it. All righty. Take a drink of water. It's Arizona and dry. All right. Let's go to our Azure Data Factory. All right, so we've seen this, and you saw when I dropped that in, I get it. I can also hit the plus here. And I'm going to start with the Wrangling data flow just to show you that, since that's the one that everybody is least familiar with. In this case, now I have 0 data sets, so I know if I say add source data set, I'm not going to have anything. So I'm going to hit create new data set. They are very kind to just show you the list of exactly what is available. And you can see it's a short list. If you go to your Azure Data Factory pipelines, again, there's a much, much longer list of what's available for sources. I'm going to choose Azure Blob Storage because I have a CSV in there. You can see the data types available. You could use any of these here. I'm going to hit continue. So I'm not going to bother renaming that for now since this is just a demo. Go to Azure Blob Storage and come on, behave. There he goes. Demo. All right. Yeah, we'll just throw in the earthquake data for fun. Okay, so we have the earthquake data. I know that this is data from the USGS from a few years ago of a swarm of earthquakes that hit the state of Washington, I think in May. So in this case, I know that the first row is a header, so I want to check that. The reason is because in the Wrangling data flow, promote headers is not available. So if you don't check first row as header, when you go in there, you're going to see that your header row is the first row of data, which you don't want to worry about. So we're going to import schema from the connection store, which means directly from that actual file, because that's the schema I'm going to use. Alrighty, so we have that. Now you can see I could add a second data set. I don't have any more data that's relevant to the earthquake data to make sense to add a second one, but I could say if I wanted to combine order header and order item, I might add a second one. So let's go to the sync data set. Again, I don't have any existing data sets. You'll notice that they've optimistically included a whole slew of other connections. These are the connections that you usually see when you're doing, say, copy data or something like that, and you're creating a connection type in your regular pipelines. So at some point in time, I anticipate that they will have added the rest of these. But right now, those connections are only the ones that aren't grayed out, which is this top 6. So in this case, again, since I have blob storage set up, I'm just going to put it in there rather than in a SQL table. And I'm going to call the limited text again. We're just going to do a CSV, and we're going to put it in a different directory. So back to my blob storage. And I'm going to go demo. And we'll just call it, yeah, I'll just put it in dirty. That's a folder I've got. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK. So it's going to go in there. And then we'll just say no schema yet. We don't want to, well, yeah, we can leave that. All right. So there we have it. Now we can go to sync properties here. And I can say clear the folder. This is going to clean out the contents of the folder before you write to it. That's your option. If you go leave it at the default, what's going to happen is it will output a bunch of other files in addition to where your result is. And it's just processing data automatically to a file. I'm not going to want it. We're going to want this little file. So I'm just going to open the single file. And earthquake. Okay. And then if you want to quote it or audio connection restored. Okay. So output the single file. You can clean the folder or not. I'm going to say okay.
Hey, Andy, are you still there? Okay, guys, just hang on really tight for me as we get her to come back in. Sorry for the inconvenience.
All right, I'm just going to restart it while we do that. Tell me when you can hear me. Data flow.
We can hear you now, Andy,
Wrangling.
but you might want to go back and repeat a couple of the steps because we probably lost you around like 11:30, 11:29-ish, maybe 11:28.
Okay. So about a minute. Darn it. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. And let me make sure the video,
Okay.
because some people are saying the video's gone too as well. Can you guys see the video? I just want to double check real quick. Okay, they're saying yeah. Okay. Okay, sorry
Okay,
guys.
good. Sorry. All right, so I'm going to go into, I don't know how much you saw, so I'm selecting my source, the import.
You're going out again, Andy. You're going out again.
Mobile hotspot. All right, I have to see if that'll help. Audio connection restored. I am so sorry, gang. All right, I've got my mobile hotspot turned on, so hopefully it will connect to that. Connect, there we go. All right. Can you see now, Crystal? Oh, geez.
Yeah, we can see your screen and we can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, and I've hit OK, and it's just sitting there. Come on. I hate CenturyLink, but it's the only thing available out here.
No worries.
Okay, come on. All right, you know what I'm going to do? Back. Okay. All right. Add source data set. Okay, so I already created that one, and the sync data set, I'm just going to add the ones that I created. Okay, so what I did is I selected for a source data set was my earthquakes data, and then my sync data set is pretty much just an output directory where I'm going to put stuff. I'll put single file. CSV. And you also have the option, you could say quote all if you want to put double quotes around everything. All right, now let's see if he's going to come up. And there's nobody else using the internet here either because my husband took off for the day. So, all right. So I'm only going to do just a couple of transformations to demonstrate how this works because we do want to get to the other one and because my connectivity is kind of sucky. Come on, you, please show up. Let's see if it'll show the advanced editor. There. Okay, so here again, advanced editor, just like you see in Power Query, where it does the source. There we go. Okay, so here's your data. And you can do things just like you can do in Power Query, such as all of these guys here. They're pulled in as text. And let's see, decimal number is what we want for these. So it's going to go in, and you can see it adds the steps. It's going to list them on the right-hand side. It has your well-known mQuery that you've seen in Power Query. You will see that there are a bunch of other options in here. You'll see things like pivot columns is available. And as I said, I've tried these, and a lot of times it will give you problems with that because it has troubles with Spark. The important thing here is this button that says supported transformations. And if you go ahead and load that, and I already have that oh good, it did it. I was gonna say I already have it loaded. This will tell you the full list. Again, the link is already in the Wrangling data flows, so all you have to do is just click on it. And this will tell you, here's all the stuff you can do, like merging, joining tables, group by, sorting. And then here's the known unsupported columns. And there you can see that promote headers is not available, combine columns, nested join, pivot, so transpose. Some of those are not available. Unfortunately, this list here will tell you absolutely everything that is missing. So if you have questions or get frustrated, look in here and see what functions are supported. And that's easily accessible through the button in the top right-hand corner. And then when you're done, you can hit done. I'm not going to do too many changes because the internet's been misbehaving, but I think you have the idea. You could hit publish all. This would publish and save this and keep a copy of it for you. Now, since this particular data factory really doesn't have anything in there, I'm going to pop over to a SQL Saturday data factory so that I can now show you the mapping data flows. So Crystal, let me know if we've got any problems. Okay, so for the settings, again, you're going to select the data flow that you've created. In this case, I've already created this taxi demo, but if you want to, I mean, again, if you just do create data flow and then select the mapping data flow, you would go in and do that, and you'd have to select your sources and your sinks, and then it would have them available. And pretty much you just put your source in. This here is, we have some text files. So some of the nice things that you have in here, you do have the option of it sampling the data. In other words, do a simple of it or just some you can so you want to on the data using it. What this does it's going to spin up a instance for you that's already predefined.
Hey Andy, you're sounding kind of muffled again.
From my phone. Probably. My opinion. Lost.
Do you want to try maybe dialing in from your phone?
Connection restored. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. All right. So some of the options that you have is allow address, file, column, column. This table will not fill unless where if your schema changes a little bit.
Yeah, Andy, you're going out again.
Okay.
Do you want to try maybe dialing from your phone?
I would say that I'm trying to phone. Phone. Here, let me just 2, 1, 3, 2, 9, 2, 2, 1. webinar.
Are you there?
921.
I am here.
I am here. I'm
trying
to get in.
Okay, I can hear you.
Okay, I can hear
I can
you.
hear me echoing in there.
I can hear me echoing in
Yeah, we can hear you echoing too.
there. So that must.
All right. I think. Hold on.
Hold on.
Okay, it's because I have two audios.
Okay,
So now I have to figure out. Did this work? Am I no longer echoing?
Yes, I can. We can hear just one of you.
Yay. Okay. Yes. So what happened was I got my phone connected and then I was echoing. Okay. So all right, where was I? Okay. So you probably heard schema drift. We allow schema drift. Sorry about this audio problem, guys. And then infer drifted columns means if there is a new column that shows up, then go ahead and figure out what data type it is. If you forget what it is, you'll notice that you can hover over the little information thing and it will tell you what those items mean. So with this, it's pretty much not necessarily a drag and drop, but you hit the little plus sign and that allows you to add different things. So in this case, the trip data, we then added a join. Here's a join here. You can see that there are the same number of ones that I had shown you in the graph are all that's available here, but these are your options. You can go and you select those. That will go add another little brick. In fact, I think I can just link. And you can see it will just go put that right in there in the middle if you want. So I'm going to remove that. So it will just go in and add those, and then you just have your destination sync. Different options you can do. In this case, this one is a join. And for joins, the neat thing is you do have the choices of the standard SQL style joins. Your inner join, left join, right join, cross join, full outer. And you get to specify one or multiple columns for the join. So that's what I've done there, is done that to join, because what I'm joining is I have some trip data here for taxi trips. And down here I have trip fare. That's the how much money was collected for each. Why they were in separate files, I guess it's because of the size of the file. So this joins them together. And then we can do some aggregations. And this one, aggregate day stats, what I'm doing is I'm doing an aggregation over date, and then I'm outputting it into a table where I have the aggregation over date. In that match data, I've also done, essentially I said, okay, we're going to do a second aggregation. So it makes a copy of that join match data as a reference, and then gives us the second aggregation, which is the aggregate vendor stats. So now we're aggregating over the vendor ID. So as you can see, you can do multiple outputs with this. So it's very much like SSIS. And in fact, here's another one where I'm just taking the fare and then I'm doing the payments by payment type, because the fares have those payment types. Within this, since we spent so much time with audio issues and my internet hasn't been behaving, my data flow debug hasn't turned on. But if it had turned on, then when you click to the data preview, you would actually be able to see what the data looks like at that particular step. Again, because my data flow debug hasn't decided to turn on, I can't show you that, but go ahead and create your own. This taxi data demo one is actually one of the templates that you can download from the Data Factory. You can download it and then practice with it and learn more of how it works. So let's go back to my slideshow here, my cute little dragon. And where's the rest of my slideshow? There he is. Okay. So which do you use? Wrangling data flow or mapping data flow? Of course, the classic Microsoft answer, it depends. Between them, it depends. Well, what do you want to do that determines which one you choose? For wrangling data flow, you will want to use that if you're preparing and exploring data. Basically, if you're focused pretty much just on the data itself, you'll want the Wrangling data flows. For mapping data flows, if you're needing to do lots of transformations, kind of like what you would do in SQL Server integration services, then you'll want to use those mapping data flows. Again, this is focused more on the flow of data, that is the movement of data from point A to point B, whereas the Wrangling is focused more on the data itself. So the way I tend to think of it is, since both of them have similar sources and sinks, similar sets of transformations, although the mapping data flows have more transformations, usually what we do is we'll combine them to have the best of both worlds. And in that case, for such as a modern data warehouse solution, clean and prepare the data using Wrangling data flows. Then you can go load the data into a dimensional model in the data warehouse using the mapping data flows. That's kind of, I guess, the ideal situation. So, or you could just use your Azure pipelines too. This is a reminder which says, not only is my presentation nearly done, but Nirmal here has reminded me that I want to double check. See, this has finally turned on, that I have turned this off. So actually, if we hit refresh, we would actually see the data now. It's going to take too long, so I'm just going to kill it. You do always want to kill the data flow debug. And the reason is because the debug session has a default minimum of 60 minutes of billing time unless you manually switch it off. If you want to save money on your Azure, then definitely manually turn it off every single time you finish with it. That's pretty much the most important thing. So that's all I have for you today. I apologize terribly for my horrendous audio problems. I hope that you were able to understand enough of it, given that you know, we kept losing audio. But other than that, are there any questions, Crystal?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can
You
hear you.
got quite a bit of questions in here. Do you want me to read them off, or do you want to read them off?
Yeah, why don't you read them off, because I'm trying to find. There's a lot of I can't see it.
Yeah, there's a lot of those. Let me hold on. Let me scan through some of those really quickly. Yeah, a lot of lost audio. Okay, I'm gonna jump around here a little bit, guys. Hold on. Show.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of just, whoops, we can't see it.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, so somebody had.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just looking at some of them. Yes, there are. Yeah, there are certain things that certain sinks do. Does Azure Data Factory have it? I think you're right that the XML sync may not be something that is available at all. Let me just check. Data set, new data set. Here's the list of them, and yeah, I think XML is probably so rarely used that I don't think anybody has something as an XML sync. You would probably have to find a way of reading the XML into a SQL query and pulling it in that way, and then doing it. Yeah, because I don't think any of these really work with that. And even blob storage is going to, it gives you JSON, but not XML. So generally speaking, I don't think any of these are going to give you an XML option. It's rare that people are using those these days, but I know XML is supposed to be the big thing. So as far as I can tell, there is no XML. That was a question that I found. Screen is frozen. Oh, you poor thing. All right. Did you find any other questions, Crystal?
Yeah, I'm still digging through some of them. I think I'm stuck on.
To the PowerPoint. Yeah, I'm just saying the screen gets stuck every time. Sorry. All right.
Someone asked, I don't know if you already saw this question. Please repeat, what is the difference between Wrangling and the other data flow?
Oh, wrangling and mapping data flow. Okay, sure. The main difference, let me go back to my slide here. So the main difference is that they're essentially considered to be used for two different purposes. The mapping data flow is used for transforming data. So if you're doing transformations, you're doing inserts, updates, deletes, slowly changing dimensions, things like that, you would do the mapping data flow. The wrangling data flow is more for preparing and exploring data. So this is when you're focusing on the data. So this would be perhaps the early part of your data warehouse transformation. You could use a wrangling data flow to pull your data in from, blob storage, read it, reformat it so that you could fix things such as capitalization or scrub the data types, and make those kinds of changes. And then you would switch to the mapping data flow to go do your transformation where maybe you're pivoting the table or adding columns or things like that. So that's the main difference. Anything else, Crystal? Why do we need, okay, here's a good one. Why do we need to use Azure Data Factory? What more is there in it than what there is in SSIS? I know I get that very frequently. Part of it's a comfort thing because SSIS has been around for a couple decades, if you include its predecessor DTS, whereas Azure Data Factory is new. And the nice thing about Azure Data Factory is it does have connectors for many of the more modern options. So it connects very smoothly with the rest of the things that you have in Azure. And yes, SSIS can do that, but SSIS usually is mostly on-prem. They do have an option in Azure Data Factory where you can run your SSIS packages within Azure Data Factory if you want to get most of it in the cloud. And as you've seen with COVID, it's actually a lot easier if we have all of our servers in the cloud, which means I can work from anywhere, including from home. If the server's in a building and you own the building, if something goes wrong, you might have to actually go into the building to go do it. So the advantage of switching to Azure Data Factory is that you can really work on it from anywhere. It can be accessed from all over the world. It can have the redundancy, worldwide redundancy, without your company having to purchase the infrastructure to host servers in various cities around the world. So that's kind of one of the advantages. I mean, if you think about the big hurricanes that they have in Florida, if you're in Florida, if you just have local servers, they can be destroyed by the hurricane and you're down. If you're in Azure, you can have servers all over the world, in which case if a hurricane hits Florida, your business is still up and running because it's in Azure. So that's kind of one of the main reasons for going to Azure Data Factory. And okay, I saw another question. He was saying, why do we need to use the wrangling data flow? You don't really need to use it. In theory, you could use the mapping data flow, or you could just use the regular Azure pipeline. I think the reason why they added in the wrangling data flow is they wanted to have something where people who aren't true IT people, but maybe they've done a lot with the data flows would have the opportunity to be able to use Azure Data Factory using an interface that's more familiar with them. Because if they're used to working with, say, Power BI, then they would be happier working with a Wrangling data flow because they understand that, because they've been manipulating data that way for a long time. The mapping data flows, that's probably more for people who are more comfortable with SQL Server integration services. But again, you could use either one for transforming your data. So, Crystal, do you see any other questions?
No, looks like you.
Oh, they do have, does the mapping data flow have restrictions on the volume of data? That's a good question. I have not tested it to see how long it takes on 100 million rows. Now, you would have to go and modify the debug setup for that. The default Databricks cluster that they have for debugging is a fairly small one. You would set up a data flow integration runtime that would be running, say, a larger Databricks cluster. And as long as your Databricks cluster is big enough, it should be able to go do it. So it would be something you probably have to experiment with. I'm pretty sure if the amount of data you're processing is more than what the cluster you currently have can handle, it's going to give you an error message saying, hey, this cluster is not big enough. And then you could go in and with a Databricks cluster, you add more servers, you add larger servers, and you would be able to scale it up to whatever size that you need to have. So you should be able to process and transform that number of rows, but you would have to size up the cluster in order to do so. Okay. Thanks for explaining. Okay, you're welcome, Joe. And then I'm just trying to see
Yeah, no problem.
if I have any other real questions in there. Okay, to do data flows and wrangling data with SQL Server sources, must we first upload it using the copy data? I'm not sure what you mean by first upload it. If it's already in the SQL Server source, you can connect both the wrangling data flow and the mapping data flows directly to Azure SQL. I don't have a Azure SQL database active in, actually, I think I do. I lied. I think I do. Cancel. Yeah, so let's go back to a pipeline here so I can get a, yeah, so for the data flows, let me just add data flow. Yeah, that one has it. Okay. So when I add a source, yeah, see, I have my Azure SQL database. So I can just go ahead and use the Azure SQL database directly. It can be either a source or a thing. So if I have tables in these, I could go use them. There we go, customer. So I could go in here, connect to that SQL database, and then use that easily. Actually, I think that means it's an invalid one if the test connection is turned off. So yes, you can use it. You don't have to use the copy data if it's already in SQL. If it's in an Azure SQL database, you're good. If it's in a SQL Server source that's on-prem, then you would probably have to copy the data to either Azure SQL or to blob storage and then use it. You may be able to connect to on-prem. So why do we need, okay, so is there, oh yeah, he did say on-prem, not Azure. Actually, there is a SQL Server connection, but I don't think, oh, let's find out. Let me hit new. No, right now, the wrangling data flows are pretty much only Azure. So for the wrangling and the mapping data flow is similar too. The mapping data flow is going to be the same. Yeah, so you would have to use the copy data to bring it into Azure SQL from on-prem, and then you could use either of the data flows to manipulate it with it. But it's only these sources that are shown are the ones that are available for both the wrangling and the mapping type. And you would have to set up a special connection to that. So if you wanted to connect to on-prem, remove it first. You would set up a runtime, an application runtime for your SQL Server, which is essentially something that allows a connection between your on-prem and Azure. And this guy's taking its time about loading. Here we go. So you have the link service. So here you would set up an integration runtime. And this is a self-hosted integration runtime, which is turned off. That would be one where I download some software onto my SQL Server. And then that's how I create essentially a gateway between Azure and my on-prem SQL. Okay, it is just a little bit past 9, so I think that's about all the time we've got right now.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Andy, so much. I appreciate you coming back in and finishing strong. We really appreciate it.
All right, yeah, and I apologize for the audio mess.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. As for everybody else who is asking for the recording will be available tomorrow in your inbox, probably around 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So please look out for that.
Sorry.
It's okay. We apologize for all of the audio issues. I'm so sorry, but if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Andy. We are more than happy to help you guys out. Again, thank you guys so much for sticking with us today. I hope you guys have a good rest of your Tuesday and have a wonderful day. Again, Andy, thank you so much.